hello there, everyone. I'm Michael Osinski.
And I am Tyler Esselman.
And you are listening to This One Goes to 11.
This One Goes to 11. It's our podcast, isn't it, Michael?
Sure is.
It's our podcast where we invite someone into our virtual living room to make their case for an album that they believe is perfect.
So perfect, in fact, that 10 out of 10 just is not good enough.
No, you know, and I've been thinking about the role that we play in the media landscape for music, and I think we're striking the right balance, Michael. I think we're,
balance between what?
We're striking the right balance between cutting everything down and building everything up. It's all about just getting things over 10. That is the key. As long as it's over 10, we're good.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, they all got to win.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've extolled the virtues of capitalism on this podcast many times. So yeah, it's all about winning.
Well, we have an album today that I think is that I think he probably wouldn't give a shit. The artist who in question probably wouldn't give a shit whether we thought his album was perfect or not. And somebody who I think makes a wonderful case for that album. Who are we talking to today, Michael?
We are talking to Sarah Scafidi-McGuire. Sarah Scafidi-McGuire is the host of Trail Mix, a relaxed and upbeat mix of new folk, old folk, pop, rock, blues, soul, and Americana music each week only on North Country Public Radio in Canton, New York. Sarah's first CD was Allman Brothers' Eat a Peach from 1972. And in her teen years, she lived right near the Garden State Arts Center in New Jersey. And so she got to see a lot of great shows, including the Allman Brothers, the Doobie Brothers, the Moody Blues, Santana, Tom Petty, the Steve Miller Band, the Spin Doctors, the Beach Boys, the Indigo Girls, Sarah McLachlan, and so many more. Sarah is also a yoga teacher, and she has been teaching Ashtanga and Vinyasa yoga at the Yoga Loft in Canton since 2005. She also organizes and teaches yoga in the park at the Canton Farmers Market. She lives with her family in an off-the-grid, energy-efficient home in Canton, New York, and spends most days with her two sons. She enjoys the outdoors, especially running, going to the beach, and rock and ice climbing, which all scans based on the conversation you're about to hear.
Yeah, she rules.
So fitting.
Yes, yeah. She's like public radio, doing all the outdoor stuff. Like, she's just groovy gal.
Yeah, and this is an album that, amazingly, it's an album that's been on a lot of lists, and I hadn't even listened to before we do this. It's like one of those albums you see on those lists. It's
just part of the wallpaper, and then somebody points it out, and then you say, "Oh God, yeah, this shit rocks."
Yeah, exactly. So why don't we let's stop dilly dallying and let's just get right to the episode, shall we?
Let's shall. Without any further ado, Sarah Scafidi-McGuire, welcome to This One Goes to 11. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm really well today. Thanks.
We're so excited. Yes, I'm feeling good. It's early here in Los Angeles, but I feel like I got the sun. Up with the sun is a good thing for me.
Tyler knows Canton too, because Tyler actually came to campus last year for a week-long residency. So if you reference things,
I did, yes.
So if you reference things in Canton, he will know what you're talking about for the most part. So
that's so cool. Yeah. So what was your residency? What did you do?
Well, Michael and I like to make a little theater together every now and then, and so we were very lucky. We were very lucky to get a grant from the university, from SLU, to start workshopping a new piece with our friend Casey Morris, who's also a friend of the pod. Incidentally, we did a very fun. We did an episode of this podcast about an artist named Sybil Bayer. Are you familiar with Sybil Bayer?
No.
I think you'd dig her. Cool. So we did a very fun episode of that. So we did some devising theater. Man, it's like, that's heaven to me. Is nice. getting in a room with my boys and making a little foolishness. Yeah. That's basically what we did. And we met some great students from SLU as well. How long have you been in the North Country?
I actually graduated from SLU. I'm from New Jersey, and nice. I graduated from St. Lawrence in 2000. So I left, but I came back a couple of years later and never left.
Well, we're gonna get a little bit more of that. Little bit more of that that little biographical information here in a minute.
Okay.
But you're here for a very serious purpose, which is you are presenting an album that I think many people are going to know. You're bringing a very well-known album before the tribunal. Tell us, Sarah, what album hath thou brought before this one goes to 11 tribunal today?
Today we're going to be talking about Van Morrison's Astral Weeks.
Yes,
which I had never heard. I mean, I had heard of. I had heard of it because it's like it's always on the lists, right? It's always on like the Rolling Stones lists and all the best albums of all time lists. But like, I mean, and when I looked at the track listing, I realized, I don't know anything off this album. I only knew like Moondance and Brown Eyed Girl, and I think there's another one that's
Into
pretty
the
popular.
Mystic.
Exactly, that one. Yeah. So this was new for me. I hadn't ever listened to it.
We appreciate that. We appreciate that choice. Like maybe the lesser chosen of the Van Morrison albums. I would argue maybe he is a single guy. He's like a singles guy over the course of his career.
Definitely, I think like aside from this album, I think this album stands out in so many ways from all the other albums because it's not really a singles. It's not really poppy. It's just totally a vibe.
A thing unto itself. Yeah, a vibe, as the kids would say. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, to get a little bit more of that vibe, we have a great segment for it. For those of you who may not know who Van Morrison is, for those of you who may want just a little taste of context around what this album is, we have this segment that will help you get up to speed. Michael, what is that segment?
It's called Beginner's Guide to Van Morrison's Astral Weeks in 60 seconds. And Tyler is taking the reins on this one.
I'm going to do it. This one's a vibe as well.
So, even though we're going to be evaluating your case for this album, before we do that, you get to evaluate Tyler's case. So you can use whatever scale you choose. Letters, numbers. I believe someone used colors once. So I mean, it's we're open to all sorts of evaluation systems around here. Tyler, are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Okay. All right. Let's put 60 seconds on the clock. And you'll start in 3, 2, 1, go.
When you look back on your life, what will you be able to say you did consistently over the course of 7 decades? Well, Sir George Ivan Morrison, better known as Van Morrison, has been making music, performing, and taking his listeners on journeys across the interior spiritual landscapes of love for that long, and doesn't show many signs of slowing down. Morrison got his start doing the rounds of his native Belfast, Northern Ireland with various Irish show bands and the R&B group Them, before striking out on his own and striking his own little bit of solo gold with, you guessed it, pop hit Brown Eyed Girl. Astral Weeks, technically Morrison's second full-length solo album, has been described as a mystical song cycle that amalgamates folk, jazz, blues, and classical styles into an extended stream of consciousness tone poem meditating on the power of earthly love to help us transcend together. Pretty groovy, right? While it didn't quite hit at the time, as so many classics do, the challenging process of creating Astral Weeks would further embolden Morrison to make daring moves with his prodigious musical talents, continuously experimenting with the fusion of musical influences he steeped himself in, and carving out a space for himself as one of the farthest out, biggest, baddest, booming artists of the 20th century.
All right.
Yeah.
Well done. Well, thank Sarah, what do you think about that? It's like, how would you evaluate Tyler's job there?
Yeah, I think that was a really good job. I want to give points for the word consistency or consistently. I don't know what you said that. I mean, he consistently puts out music. I think he said something about that. But that's like one of my themes for this album is consistency.
Awesome.
I think I also want to give you a point or points for, you said journey, taking us on a journey. You said the word gold.
Yeah.
I also feel like it's just like pure gold, some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And the other things I like that you said were that it was a tone poem.
Yeah. It really feels like that, doesn't it?
I read a lot of like different descriptions of the album, but tone poem was not one of them, but it totally fits.
Oh, good.
And thank you for calling Van Morrison the farthest out something, because I totally agree. 5 awesome, like mellow boat rides.
Oh, I like that. Yes. 5 awesome mellow boat rides for my 60-second intro. That's amazing.
That's wildly appropriate for this artist and your job, Tyler. Well
on done. A mellow boat ride, I'm playing Van Morrison for sure.
Oh, yeah. This album,
thank you,
for
Sarah.
sure.
Well, before we get further into Van himself, Sir Van, as himself,
Sir Van.
we want to talk a little bit more about you, Sarah. You know, this is we love making this podcast. I don't want to speak for Michael. I love making this podcast, but it's so often people.
I do.
It's so often people that we know. It's my dad, or it's a mutual friend of ours that we had on. So to have a quote unquote stranger on here is a very exciting thing for us, and we've been looking forward to it. So we want to know, especially in your capacity, in the work you're doing now, how would you characterize your relationship with music these days? If you can take it from the beginning, kind of your early relationship with music, all the way up till now, how would you characterize it?
Sure. So I've always been a music lover and not much of a musical artist myself. I mean, I could like sing along, but I've always been just an absolute lover of music and a concert goer. And all through my childhood, I listened to music of my mom and dad. And then I grew up out right 10 minutes from the Garden State Art Center, or what used to be the Garden State Art Center. Nice. I think it's now the PNC Bank Art Center. But anyway, I saw so many great concerts all through my high school. I would just blow all my, Carvel ice cream work money on concerts. And I would see Allman Brothers, and I'd see Lilith Fair, and I went and saw the Dead in the City, and I saw the Moody Blues and Tom Petty, and just all fabulous concerts. I would say that I did kind of drop off when I came to St. Lawrence, came to college, and I just dropped out of pop culture in general, I think, because I took it in that direction. I was went to Kenya, and I lived in a cabin in the woods, and I carried my own water and did that kind of thing, and listened to a lot of Prairie Home Companion and that kind of North public radio type of thing. Yeah. But then, it definitely came back it didn't really leave my life, but it came back into my life in a stronger way. And then I had the opportunity, or I guess I kind of wiggled myself in. 4 years ago, North Country Public Radio, which I was a devoted listener to here in Canton, our station manager left, and she had an afternoon musical show. And so there was a hole in the schedule. Mm. I know the music director who does another show, David Summerstein, is the news director and musical director for North Country Public Radio. I said, what are you going to do? What's going to be the show? He said, I don't know. I said, well, I'll do it. So yes. I didn't have any experience, and it was always a pipe dream. I was like, I would love to have a music show. I'd love to host and be a DJ. I figured out how to use the board. I got taught. I did a bunch of volunteer hours and figured out what I was going to do, and did some trial shows, and they liked it. And I've been doing that ever since. So I host a show called Trail Mix on North Country Public Radio.
An excellent show, everyone.
Afternoons. And it's kind of a mix of new folk and old folk and pop and rock and blues and soul and Americana and dance and jam band and some punk and just a trail mix of music, but mostly steeped in relaxed and upbeat vibes.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay, I gave you some points. I gave you 900 points for Carvel ice cream money, funding your concert habit, and then 6,000 points for Prairie Home Companion. Just go ahead, Michael.
Well, first regarding the Carvel thing, I think it's important to know: did you ever meet Fudgy the Whale?
No, but I made Fudgy the Whale.
Oh, yeah. You made.
I actually typed Fudgy.
Do you one better?
That wasn't the real question I was going to ask, but I had to for the sake of people I know who enjoyed Carvel ice cream growing up. It sounds like, because we both listened to your show, and it sounds to me like what you've described as your sort of your musical roots. It makes sense that this is the show that you would create. It sort of sounds like both a tribute to all of that, plus also what are the contemporary versions of those old bands that you listen to.
Yes,
exactly. Yeah, it's like growing up on Janis Joplin and Dylan, and Van Morrison, and finding those contemporaries like Nathaniel Rateliff, and I don't know who the female Janis is these days, but
ooh.
I noticed Lake Street Dive on the on there, which is, I mean, to me, they're making some great pop rock music that's like real pure. That like, and then Leanne LaHavas I saw on there. Holy shit,
Julia Jacklin, maybe like
Julia Jacklin's so great.
Who is the current Janis Joplin? Like, is it? I mean, I guess vocally for me a little bit. Like, who's the lead singer of Alabama Shakes?
Oh, Brittany Howard. Ooh, I like that.
So I mean, maybe that's close to vocally anyway.
I'm going to give Michael 5,000 points for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is Brittany Howard the new Janis Joplin? She would probably love that.
I think a whole series on. I do have ideas about like the new Van Morrison, the new Beatles. I think it's Lake Street Dive. I think Nathaniel Rateliff may be the new Van Morrison, and
he seems to be good energy too. Nathaniel Rateliff seems to have that kind of positive. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't met him, but just kind of like in.
Yeah, no, I think so. That like dark, but just bringing it all out in light.
And my dad loves Nathaniel Rateliff, so it's a good sign that he's, my dad's a good analog for the average listener. I think he's really good at that.
And when you put together a show, I mean, do you tend to? I mean, do you identify like a theme beforehand, or is it just sort of like each week, sort of the vibe you're feeling when you put it together? Is there some sort of like through line or a narrative? Just sort of like, because we are an album podcast. I'm wondering, like, as you put together your set list, like what sorts of things are you thinking of?
I once in a while will do a theme. Like I have a Halloween show coming up next week, so it'll be like Halloween. I'll do like a holiday theme, but other than that, it's pretty much a vibe. Like I have I have like a Spotify thing that's like cloudy day, and then I have like one that's sunny day. So I'll choose more from the cloudy day if it's like a cloudy day, and I'll choose more from the sunny day if it's a sunny day type of thing.
How has been working in public radio? Because I'm a big public radio fan. Just it's like near and dear to my heart. And we were saying, Michael and I were saying how like when you're it's at pledge drive time, you don't get a lot of time to do your own stuff, right? You just gotta kind of all be all in on getting that money. But like how is working in that space been? Are you finding the kind of creative satisfaction that you hoped it would be?
Oh yeah, it absolutely is just a joy to be able to be creative and just pick the music that I love and play it on the radio for, tens or thousands of people. And the space is great. I did start my radio show like 6 months before the pandemic hit. So that was like, I had just dipped my feet in and probably would have, maybe grown a bit. And then it was all like, I was recording at 6 a.m. because I had to homeschool my kids, and it was like, I didn't see anybody for months and months. But coming out of it, North Country Public Radio is the best public radio around, and the team is incredible. And it's just a heart. It's just so great to work there. It just warms my heart that I get to do that for work.
So how did you come to discover this album? Do you remember the moment you first heard it? Do you remember the moment where it like really stuck out to you? Like what drew you to this?
So actually, I don't remember at all the first moment that I heard Astral Weeks. We had Moondance in my household and in the minivan growing up, and that was on a lot, and I could probably sing along the entire album of Moondance. And Astral Weeks was always like, it was around. I remember seeing the album cover. We had the CD, but it wasn't on heavy rotation in my family home or in the car. Every now and again, I guess I would hear a song from it, and it would just move me. It would just really hit me hard. It's like, oh my God, it's so, the like quintessential Van Morrison sound is all wrapped up into Astral Weeks. And so I think when I got older and started like, listening to albums more, like, oh, let me put this one on and just take it through. That one fell into my heavy rotation. And one of the things that made me think that it was like, I guess one of the things that confirmed that it was like, this one goes to 11 is that I was playing it in the car recently, maybe like in the last 6 months or so. And my 16-year-old son was like, oh my God, what is this? And like, he had that same feeling like, oh my God, it's just so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then, in the past, preparing for this episode, I've listened to it like a number of times through, and it just really confirms every time that it's so, so good and worth it.
So when you like, at what point did you sort of become aware of the process of, because it was a fraught process of getting this album out, and the the death of his manager and all this organized crime stuff, and like just you could make a limited series on Paramount Plus about this.
Totally.
You genuinely could. At what point did you sort of become aware of that, and how does that add to the document that is this album in your mind?
Yeah, for me that's just a footnote. I just recently became aware of like the drama, and I usually don't read liner notes, and I don't read.
Don't.
Cool. I don't care about who produced it. Like, it was great job, but I don't know the names or like
Cool.
even the band members. I'm just like really like in the present listener.
I love that. Yeah, that's good. By the way, I gave you and I guess perhaps also your son 50,000 points for "Oh my God, what is this?" Because well, that's a singular moment with any album, right? Like, you're like, what am I hearing? Love that.
It is sort of. I mean, I was struck listening to it. I mean, I'm going to confess, like I've been trying to sort of figure out this album since it was so new to me, and I think that it is sort of a unique format. The idea, like, I'm going to echo what you said about. To sort of applaud what Tyler said about calling it a tone poem, because it does sort of feel like I'm looking for that like central foundation or something to pull it all together, and it's kind of not there. Mm-hmm. But
it's like you're on a lily pad it's really unstable, I feel like.
Yeah, but it did feel. I did this morning. I was like, oh wait a minute, I might actually have a reference for this. Have you ever read or tried to read, because I must confess I have never finished this. Have you ever read or tried to read James Joyce's Ulysses?
No. Maybe.
I mean, because it's just, I mean, it's Irish, much like Van Morrison, but it is just this story that it's meant to be one day in the life of this one character. It's super thick. It's super stream of conscious, and it's like, or consciousness rather, and you kind of have to like pull it all together yourself. But I sort of imagine, like, when I thought of it that way, and I think of the album, it's like him just sort of walking through this. I don't know if it's a fictional location or a location from his past, or maybe it's somewhere in between the two. I'd actually think it would be cooler if it were somewhere in between the two. When you think of it that way, as like someone just kind of wandering around and like taking in the surroundings, I was like, oh, now I get it. Now it's not. This is no Moondance or Brown Eyed Girl. This is something very different. And the fact that I heard that they only recorded this in 3 days, apparently, like sort of like
crazy,
jumped in and did that. I know that kind of helped me better understand what's going on within this album.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's really not a story. It's not like a narrative. And although there are themes, it's just so like present. It's just so like floaty. Like, I mean, I ended up reading a little bit about Astral Weeks on the web in preparation, and there's so many like repeat words like, transcendence or tranquility or like dreamscape, or like somebody said dewdrops, or like what somebody else said, hazy pastoral paradise.
Ooh,
I drank a beer like that last night, actually. That's interesting you say that. It's almost like ambient music in a certain respect. Do you listen to much ambient music?
I like ambient music. I also, in addition to my radio gig, I do teach yoga, and I've been doing that for 20 years. So I listen to a lot of ambient music in yoga, and like a lot of stuff that is even like this album. It's like it has words, but they don't matter because it's not. You don't need to listen because he's just kind of mumbling, and like it's all about trees and rain and walking and love and like it's not really like you don't need to listen to get what he's talking about.
Yeah.
He also does love some flute on this album, let me tell you.
There's
some solid flute playing here.
And I guess the flute player never even got recognized or something like that. I don't know. Did you look that up?
I read that, there's I guess when he, after all the like legal trouble, and then he like married that woman so he could stay in America, and then he moved somewhere to like Cambridge, Massachusetts, I think, and there were a couple. He started like jamming with a couple of people, and one of them was a flautist. and that's how all the Astral Weeks material got generated. But I think originally when he started recording, that the original flautist wasn't available, but then the flautist came in and was like, "Oh, this is cool. Can I play on the next time you record?" So there are a few tracks where they don't know who played flute. However, the title track is not one of them. That is the whoever the original guy is, and I apologize to his family for not knowing his name. But
we'll make a donation.
We'll make a donation to his family.
There is something I want to go. I did also give Michael. I'm just giving Michael a bunch of points today, Sarah. I'm sorry. I just like him. I gave him 25,000 points for that Ulysses Astral Weeks. That Ulysses Astral Weeks thing, because I do think, in my understanding of Van Morrison, I've never visited Ireland. Have you visited Ireland before, either the Republic or Northern Ireland?
My husband and I honeymooned in Ireland 20 years ago, and we rented a houseboat, and we went up the River Shannon, and it was incredible, and it was very much like this vibe. It was like the green and the water, and we didn't make it all the way up to Dublin, but we did have a grand time.
Oh, that's grand. 500,000 points for an Irish honeymoon. Because one of my favorite, I get roasted for this a lot, but one of my favorite artists who I feel very connected to is Glenn Hansard from, the Swell Season and Once and his solo stuff.
Why do you get roasted for that?
I get roasted for lots of things, Michael. You know this.
Okay. Yeah.
But he's another amazing Irish musician who, both of the times I've seen him, has paid specific homage to Van, and has this sort of is carrying on this tradition. There's something so Irish about Van Morrison in the fact that he sort of bucks against his Irishness in some ways, if that makes sense. When you think of Van Morrison, do you think Irish, or what's the thing when you put Van Morrison in the idea of him in your head? What are the let's create a tone poem here. What are the images that come up for you for Van Morrison?
I guess I just think really simple, him and a guitar. That's the image is just him in a bar with a guitar. Because I think that's Irish. All where it really roots from. Yeah, and definitely Irish, and definitely just not out for the stardom, Yeah. So I just recently saw the Taylor Swift movie.
Oh, you did? Yesterday. How was it? I haven't seen it yet.
Well, it was good, and my 13-year-old is a huge fan, and so I took him, and we're both huge fans. But
yeah,
I will say that I didn't come away with it loving Taylor Swift more than I loved her before.
Really? Okay.
And I think it's because she's it was so, I don't know, so much about me, Taylor. I'm the star. Thank you for coming to see me. I don't know. Van Morrison, he's just he just seems so chill. He could care less. I don't know if he he probably has a mansion somewhere, but he's just hanging there by the water, just looking out the window.
Yeah. I mean, this is tale as old as time, isn't it? Too the role that ego plays in that creative process, and and I say ego in the least judgmental way possible. I just mean our sense of self. What Taylor is doing is simply unfathomable to me on a personal level, because I'm I can't imagine having exposing myself, my vulnerable spiritual self to the masses of the world in such a way. So I always respect when somebody is able to have a career like Van Morrison. I believe he's probably a great example of this, that has a career that exposes himself in such a meaningful, vulnerable way for so long. Again, 7 decades. Yeah. What the hell? Yeah. But also maintains some degree of privacy and anonymity, some sort of boundary from it. It's a power. It's not easy to do, I don't think.
And there's some sort of mysteriousness around, mystery around him still. But that's so the draw. It's so cool.
Okay, let's listen to a little Van Morrison, shall we? What song have you chosen as your standout track from this album, though it may have been a bit of a task to do that?
So I chose for the standout track the title track, which is the first track. It's Astral Weeks. It really sets the tone. You'll see when we listen, it just draws you in, and you do feel at least I felt this listening to this whole album. It's I felt like I was just getting on a boat with Van Morrison in the Northern Atlantic, and like you're just taken. And then there's so this is the beginning. You just step in and you're just transported.
Perfect thing to wet the listener's whistle. Everybody, this is Astral Weeks from Astral Weeks. We'll be back in just a second. That's the end of part 1. If you access this episode via our YouTube playlist, you're about to hear our guest's standout track. If you'd like to jump ahead to part 2, you'll find a link in the description of this episode.